Welcome to Rails, Ales, and Old Towns. As stories of Croatia's alluring coastal cities, handsome harbor towns, and dreamy islands have spread far and wide, the country has become one of the hottest destinations in Europe. I love Croatia, but since it's been a little bit since I've been there, I thought it would be a good idea to invite someone on the show who can let me know what it's like to travel there now. Enter global travel guru and my pal, Adam Seper. You remember Adam, right? He was my guest on the very first episode of Rails, Ales, and Old Towns, and on the show we talked about his and his family's upcoming first trip to Croatia. Well, today he's back to give me a full trip report. From Pearl of the Adriatic, Dubrovnik, to islands like Korčula, Hvar, and a hidden gem you're going to want to know about, our conversation runs up and down the Croatian coast, with Adam giving personal recommendations regarding restaurants and a top-notch boat captain along the way. If you're thinking of Croatia anytime soon, you're going to want to hear what Adam has to say. All right, let's go to Croatia.
What is the gap between the train and the platform?
Let's welcome back to Rails, Ales, and Old Towns, a man that needs no introduction, Adam Seper.
Hi there, Scott. Thanks for having me again.
Now, Adam, before we get into everything about this trip to Croatia, you've traveled the world, you've gotten married to a wonderful wife, you have 3 great children, you've seen your favorite sports teams, St. Louis Cardinals, the Blues, win championships, you've seen Fish play at the Sphere in Las Vegas. But how does it compare to being the first returning guest on this podcast?
Oh, I don't know that any of those can compare to this. I am honored to be the first repeat guest here on your wonderful podcast.
That was what I was hoping you'd say. Great to have you back. It's just like old times.
Absolutely.
So, first and foremost, Croatia, is it good?
Oh my gosh, yes. It was amazing. It exceeded very high expectations. I had pretty high hopes, and it blew all of us away, my entire family.
Yeah, and let's not beat around the bush on that. There's some hype with Croatia.
For sure.
How did it get on your radar? Like, how long ago and like through what means?
Well, honestly, we ended up there purely by luck. It's not like it was one of those places that was high on my travel wish list. We knew we were going to go to Europe last summer. We really were wide open as far as to where we were going to go. We started looking at flights, and we found a super cheap flight from Chicago to Dubrovnik. And I was like, oh, Croatia. I was like, I've heard lots of great things about Croatia. So that's how we ended up in Croatia, honestly. It was, we found a good flight deal. That's how it started.
How'd you do your research?
Oh, boy. Knowing that we were going in July and early August, at like not only high season, but like the height of high season, and going on our first big international trip with our 3 kids, we knew we had to plan it out, which is not generally our MO when it comes to traveling. I guess it is now that we're, travel as a family of 5. But so we really wanted to plan it. We didn't want any surprises. So, we really just kind of started, we went to the library and got like some old guidebooks to just kind of start looking at like what we didn't even, like, we really had no idea like what to expect. We knew Dubrovnik. Obviously, we're big Game of Thrones fans. So we were familiar with that. Other than that, we were not really familiar with Croatia at all, other than it's gained a lot of popularity over the last, 10, 15 years. Once we started researching, we realized that, Croatia is a country of beaches and island activities, which suits our family perfectly because all of our kids, like they could spend all day in the water, all 3 of them. And when we started really researching more, there's like something like 1,500 islands or something. It's an absurd amount of islands that Croatia has. So island hopping is popular, and it's easy to get to and from islands. There's a variety of different ferries and ways to get around, and it's super easy to do. So we're like, all right, let's just do that. The idea of island hopping sounds great. We're used to going down to Florida and like renting a house and going to a beach, right? A sand beach. So this is totally different than what we're used to, but we're like, cool, So we decided to island hop basically. And that was no small task, choosing what islands we wanted to go to, because we wanted to book our accommodations. The more we kind of got into the research, like, you should probably book your transportation, your ferries in advance. You can turn up and get a ferry, but like, again, we wanted, kind of optimal times. We wanted to be able to plan as much as possible to make it as easy as possible.
So what were those first impressions of Croatia? Those things where you're like, wow, I'm here.
Yeah, so it was like a 45-minute drive, if I remember correctly, from the airport up to where we were staying. We did not stay in like the old town of Dubrovnik. We stayed, outside it it was like a 10 or 15-minute drive, I think. So we drove along the coast from the airport up to where we were staying. I mean, it was just gorgeous. Just driving up the coast, you could see the water. We drove by the old town of Dubrovnik. So first impressions were great. We were all excited. Everybody was tired and a little out of sorts from getting there. We weren't able to check into our Airbnb right away. We were able to drop our bags. So we kind of walked around a little bit, and then we were able to check in, and we all got our swim stuff on and just kind of went to a local beach that first day. So we didn't even get to the old town. We didn't get to like the chaos of Dubrovnik. We were staying outside of it, and it was crowded, but it wasn't anything crazy. And the beach was crowded, but it was a small beach, and that's kind of what it was a good introduction to Croatian beaches. Because there's a million of them everywhere. Like in every city, there's tons of beaches. It's not like, it's not like the Florida coastline where it's just one long beach, right? It's just these tiny little beaches. Most of them are like pebbles or rocks. And we had an awesome time our first beach experience. Crowds didn't bother us at all. The water, it was like swimming in a pool, the Adriatic.
Yeah, I love in that area of the world how people just use anything as like a beach or people just be hanging out on rocks. They'll be up against a wall and they're just soaking in the sun and they're just diving off, and it's cool. Like, it doesn't have to be a sandy beach to be a beach.
100%. Yes. My kids were they were concerned about the rocky beaches because they've never experienced it. So they hear it and they're like, oh, I don't want that. I want sand. And yeah, they were converts immediately. Like they were fine with it. They didn't care one bit.
You just got to wear those aqua socks things.
Yeah. Yes. We all had like water shoes. We did that. We went back to our place, grabbed some dinner, and got everybody to bed. And everybody like slept a normal night the first night on our new time zone. So we were able to wake up the next morning and hit the ground running, and we just had one full day in Dubrovnik. We were only there 2 nights before we moved on to our first island. And we did go to the old town that first full day. And it was crazy and it was chaotic, but we were expecting it, It's not like we were surprised by it. So it's kind of hard to be annoyed about it when, we knew it was.
You didn't walk in thinking you were going to have the place to yourself.
Correct. Yes. And there were certain like little alleyways and stuff where there wasn't anybody. So like it kind of depended on where you were. Like right outside the walls was really crazy, and like right when you walk in, and like the main kind of walkways and stuff were crazy, but it's such a labyrinth of little alleys and streets and stuff that you can just wander around, and you do get away from the crowds.
No, it's something that is just a phenomenon that even in these places that are so crowded, there's always a couple streets where you're like, oh yeah, 90% of people just go down one street.
Totally. Yes, 100%. That's exactly how it was. So we were fine just kind of wandering ourselves. We grabbed some lunch, we grabbed some gelato, which was the theme of our entire Croatian trip. We ended up kind of leaving the old town area and found a beach and hung out at the beach all day with, like overlooking the walls in the old town. And it was incredible. There was a restaurant right there on the beach that we ate at. Like we had a wonderful like first full day in Dubrovnik. We loved it.
And so now it's off to Korčula on the ferry. And you said that you booked all these ferries ahead.
Yes. Yep. We booked everything. We booked everything ahead of time, all our transportation and all of our accommodations.
So, and you found that fairly easy to book ferries ahead?
Oh my gosh, it was super easy to book ferries. There's like 3 main ferry companies, and they, some of them run the same routes. Some, there's some routes that are only run by one ferry. It just kind of varies, but it was easy. It was very easy. You can book everything online. They all have apps. Your tickets go straight to your phone. So, it was as simple can be.
How long of a ferry is that?
If I remember correctly, Dubrovnik to Korčula was only a few hours, like 3-ish hours, maybe, give or take. The longest one we took was from Split all the way back to Dubrovnik at the end, and I think that was like 6 or 7 hours. But I mean, most of them were a few hours, and we had different ones. Like that longest one was on more of like, it was a smaller one on more of like a speedboat type of thing, so it was able to make that long trip in a pretty short amount of time, consider, if you look at the map and see how far apart they are. So that was probably the most uncomfortable one, the one that was the longest. Like some of them like were just these massive ferries, and they all had bars and food and snacks, and bathrooms were nice, and it was great. I mean, we enjoyed most of the ferry rides.
Now, Korčula is a pretty big island.
It is, yes.
And where you were based, you based yourself in Korčula town.
Yes, correct.
The
Yes.
alleged birthplace of Marco Polo. What'd you think?
Oh my gosh. The coolest thing about Croatia is that like all three islands we went to were so totally different. Like they all had their pros and I mean very few cons, honestly, but they were all different, which was really, really cool. Korčula was great. It has this tiny little old city that is pedestrian only, cars aren't allowed, and that's where we stayed. Our place was in that. The place we stayed in, oh my gosh, it was, I think if I remember correctly, it was like 1,000 years old, like the building. Obviously, it had been renovated, but it was this like super skinny, 3-story tall apartment, basically. But it was so cool and unique. And I mean, like, our kids had never stayed anywhere like that at all. And, it's these little tiny winding alleyways again. It's very similar to Dubrovnik Old Town.
So that was like kind of your first introduction into island hopping.
Yes. Around the old town, what I thought was super cool and our kids thought were really cool as well. Like every 50 feet or so, there was like a break in the wall and like stairs down to the water. And they weren't beaches. It was just like big giant rocks and stuff, but they had ladders on them and you could dive in the water and swim right there. And I mean, it was so cool. Like we went swimming like after dinner one night, like the very first night that we were there when, all the kids were swimming at like 9 o'clock at night. And I mean, they thought it was just the coolest.
Oh, there's nothing better than swimming at night in the summer.
Yes. Right.
It's
right.
warm.
Yeah, for sure.
So any other impressions of Korčula what stayed with you the longest?
Yeah, so I mean, again, it was it's the beaches, like just kind of being able to walk around and find little beaches, So they had that around like the peninsula, right? There weren't really beaches, but then there was a beach still in the old town. We never even really hung out there. We kind of walked up the coast a little bit and, just found this tiny little beach that was, I don't know, 15 feet long, maybe 10, 12 feet deep going into the water. And we just, there was rocks all around that. And we just kind of threw some towels down and, had some food and just made like sandwiches and stuff and just hung out there all day,
So that was just an on the whim kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. We were just like, let's try to find a beach to hang out at. And, we just walked, it was maybe 15-minute walk from our Airbnb. Yeah. It was incredible. And then one day we did like a boat tour. We basically rented a boat with a driver. We looked into it that way. And, when we inquired about it, it seemed affordable to, basically have a boat for like 4 or 5 hours. And he took us several different places around Korčula. So that was really, really cool, being on a boat and going to various places.
Well, yeah, because when you were on the podcast the first time, you were talking about how you'd heard about these people chartering a yacht. So you kind of got a taste of that.
Right. Yes. Yeah. It was not a yacht. It was a pontoon boat. And we definitely took like it was a cheap, we looked around a bit and this was the most affordable. And, our skipper, in quotation marks, was I think he was appropriately the monetary value was appropriate for what we got. He was a bit of a character, and like he couldn't park the boat very well. I questioned whether or not I could have driven the boat better, and I've never driven a boat.
So then you're off. Now you're off to you had to have known heading into this Hvar that this place is famous.
Yes. Yes, but we stayed in Stari Grad on Hvar. We did not stay in Hvar City. So our ferry was to Hvar City, and then we had to, just catch like an Uber to Stari Grad.
I didn't know that. I did know that you stayed in Stari Grad, so that is a little more on that other side of the island. It's a little quieter.
Yep. Yes, definitely. Yeah, and we stayed. So again, Stari Grad had like an old city. We found a lot of these places had like, like an old city that was pedestrian only in these tiny little streets and alleyways, and Stari Grad was the same. We kind of stayed, there was the old city, and then there was like a bay basically, and it like we kind of stayed around the corner of the bay. But again, it was like maybe a 15-minute walk from our place to the old city. There's grocery stores in between there and a few restaurants, but most of the restaurants were kind of over there. But it was gorgeous. Like all of them were just so beautiful. And they were so different, Korčula and Dubrovnik and Stari Grad, all of their old cities were different from each other.
I'm being told that that we have to brand them as old towns because the
old towns. Okay, sorry about that. I will do that from here on out.
Yeah, I've been to that Hvar twice, and but there was something about that other side that attracted me there. It was something about the beach bars and the nightlife.
Yeah, we did not get to take part in any nightlife or beach bars, really. They did have, and they had these for any of your listeners who are family travelers. One of the cool things about all over in Croatia, they had these giant inflatables on the water. Like bounce houses, essentially. Like, I mean, massive, 100 by 100 feet, like huge inflatable things that were on the water. There was one in Stari Grad that there was a restaurant and bar like on the little, not really a cliff, but like, you take a stairwell up to this elevated bar and restaurant that overlooked the inflatable. So we sent our kids out on the inflatable and like sat there and drank some wine and just watched them.
Well, that's what I was going to say, because you're saying you didn't get involved in nightlife, but from the pictures I saw, there was plenty of wine lunches in the sun.
Well, I mean, when in Europe, that's one of my favorite parts about Europe still is that you can still get a glass of wine with your lunch or dinner for the same price as a soda. We would get the house, and let's be honest, we didn't usually just have a glass. We'd get a carafe of the house wine. It was always affordable, and so yes, we still imbibed here and there.
Day life.
Yes. Yeah, I was just during the day.
Yeah, and just in general, what would you say as far as prices on food and drink and a meal out for the family ballpark?
It kind of varied, and it really varied on what our kids ate. I feel like it was comparable to here eating out, which I find fair. We were in Europe and in Croatia on beaches eating amazing seafood. And, I mean, gosh, with the prices now, I feel like anytime the five of us go out for a meal, if we're under $100, that's good.
Yeah, because it's kind of a thing that, like, I know Croatia used to kind of have a reputation as being cheap, but I've heard in recent years that it's really kind of come up to a more standard European level.
Yes. Now we spent 24 hours in Paris on our way home from Croatia, and I can definitely say it was much cheaper than Paris.
Okay. And you went on a boat trip on Hvar as well, didn't you?
Yes. We did one out of Stari Grad as well. After the one on Korčula, we knew we wanted to at least look into another one, but we weren't kind of sure because of the cost. But we started looking around in Stari Grad, and gosh, I can't remember how we even found it. Like it literally might have been like a flyer taped to a wall, if I remember correctly. And there was just a number that you texted. And so we texted him to get a price. And again, it seemed fair. So we're like, hey, what the heck? Let's do it again. And it was probably my favorite day of our entire 3-week-long trip. They actually have a Facebook page. It's called Boat Excursions Hvar Island. Boat Excursions Hvar Island. It was great. The skipper's parents started the company, and he clearly was an expert in the area. And we did, I think it was called like a Hidden Coves tour.
Oh.
And that's quite literally what we did. It was amazing. Like he brought us to these little coves around Hvar, and I think we went to like 3 or 4 different ones, and it was like an all day thing too. I want to say it was like 6 or 7 hours at least. They had a little refrigerator on the boat, so we could bring food and beers. And the very first cove we went into, we spent an hour and a half or 2 hours there. It was the clearest water I think I've ever seen anywhere in the world. You could see straight down to the bottom, 15, 20 feet down. There was nobody else in the cove when we were there, like the entire time. So we just got to snorkel and swim around and hang out on the boat, and the kids could jump off the boat.
That's what I was just about to ask. Tell me you guys are jumping off the boat, just
100%. Yes, I'm can opener and cannonballs off of it like a child myself. It was great. It was so cool.
There's just something about the sea that gives you that makes you feel like a kid.
It does. We went to various coves just like that. I mean, just a variety of coves. They're all a little bit different, and it was a magical day.
Mind the gap between the train and the platform.
Okay, well, I just wanted to take a second to say thanks for listening to Rails, Ales, and Old Towns. I hope you're enjoying this episode and that it's helping you get excited for your next European adventure. Be sure to check out the link in the episode description, because there you'll find all the information you need if you decide to follow up on the places and topics that came up on the show. Oh yeah, if you are digging the podcast and you had a spare minute, I'd be forever grateful if you were to leave a review or a rating on the platform you're listening on, as those little things do go a long way. And if you really want to get crazy, why not give me a follow on Instagram or Facebook at Rails, Ales, Old Towns. Back to the show.
Mind the gap between the train and the platform.
One thing I love about Croatia, and I was worried that maybe this was starting to fade a bit, but it sounds like it's not. There was always this kind of like mom and pop a mode of things. Now, the way you're describing this, it sounds like that it was just a family run operation and there was just a flyer up. When you used to show up off the ferry, there'd be people just holding little laminated things for the rooms. Is that still going, or has that kind of been swallowed up, you think, by online booking?
No, I think it is, because that's how we found this, I guess everybody probably thinks it's easier to do it online. And I mean, we're so ingrained now to have to read reviews and know how it's going to be, rather than just kind of taking that leap. And we did that with this, and it was the best day on the trip. It was incredible. We had no idea what to expect, and it could have gone the other way, but it didn't.
I think you bring up a really important thing, and that's something we all need to remember while traveling around Europe. You have to take those chances, because the chances that they can surprise you, or things where you've researched it to death, can never surprise you. At the very minimum, you end up getting, well, that was exactly what I was hoping. 5 out of 5 stars. Where this, You're just like, let's just see what happens.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm so glad we did it. And we did that with restaurants too. And, you mentioned the kind of family vibe. I mean, I feel like we got that a lot eating out as well. And we read this about Croatia before we went, that they're very kid friendly and they love kids. And that was 100% the case. Look, it's stressful going out to dinner with 3 kids under 10. Knowing that we are going to be eating the vast majority of our meals out, we didn't really plan on cooking much. I was worried about that going into it, and it was not a concern. Like, everybody was very patient with all the kids all the time. They 100% laughed at some of our orders, like when we would order our 4-year-old a bowl of olives and some bread for her meal, and that's what we fed her. But I mean, they were all just super friendly and super accommodating to our kids, and never made us feel like, why would you bring your crazy kids to my restaurant?
Before we hop to the mainland, any of the first 2 island stops, any specific restaurants that you would give a shout out to, or?
Yes, 100%. So since we're, talking about Stargrad still, I mentioned watching our kids jump on the inflatables and having some wine. So that was the opposite way of the Old Town, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's how I have to refer to it as, the Old Town.
Yep.
It was the opposite way of the Old Town. There were just like 2 little restaurants around the bend, sitting right on the water, that looked interesting. Like, we looked at their menus, they looked good. The one thing about high season is that a lot of places you had to make reservations. So fortunately, when we were there in the afternoon watching our kids jump on the inflatable, so we kind of walked in and we're like, hey, can we get a reservation for tonight? And they're like, yes, absolutely. So there was one place called Eremitaz, Eremitaz. It's on Google. But that place, we had the most amazing octopus that I've ever had. This grilled octopus. It was incredible. It was a nice restaurant. That's what was cool about Croatia as well. I felt like we were able to go to these nicer restaurants and get a really nice meal with our kids, and it didn't feel awkward or out of place. So that was that one. And it was, it was overlooking the water. It was gorgeous. It was a cool vibe in there as well. We ate outdoors.
Had some music going, probably some soft kind of electronic kind of vibe.
Yeah, 100%. Cheap house wine. We went to a place in the Old Town in Starograd as well called Nook. And it was one of those just in one of those little tiny alleyways. And that was great as well. The food was incredible. We had just amazing seafood dishes. The waiter there he was great. Like, made us feel like very much home. We actually went back there a second time, like our last night in Starograd, because we liked it so much and the food was so good. And there was one dish that was incredible that we wanted to eat again.
There's something about, too, when you're on a trip, finding that place that you become a regular at.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. If we would have stayed there, like if we would have been there for like a couple weeks or a month, I probably would have eaten there every couple of days.
We've got this place when we've been to South Wales a couple times, a town called Tenby. Great beaches, beautiful little harbor. And there's this coffee shop bakery called Loafly. And every time we're there, we're going like 3 times, getting your coffee, getting your breakfast. Nope. And you just have those little special places.
Yes. Yep.
So now you're hopping to the mainland to do some road tripping.
We did, yes. Yeah, we took a ferry from Hvar to Split, and then we rented a car in Split and drove to... Now, I never did get the pronunciation. I have no idea how to properly pronounce Plitvice Lake?
Plitvice, I believe, but I was calling it Plitvice for 20 years.
Okay, yeah, I've heard Plitvice. I've heard Plitvice. I don't even know that I had heard Plitvice.
Plitvice. This is, I've heard this just about an hour ago. I looked it up.
Gotcha. All right. Well, excellent. I probably should have looked that up before we went. So we rented a car and went to Plitvice Lakes from Split. And we spent 2 nights there.
What type of accommodation?
Oh my gosh. It had been, up until this point, it had been insanely hot in Croatia. Like, I don't know if it was record-breaking heat, but it was higher. The temperatures were higher than usual. And, my delicate American sensibility used to my crazy central air conditioning, I could not handle it. So it was nice getting away. The temperature was a lot more temperate. We stayed it was a house, actually. We rented a house that was, I think it was like maybe a 10-minute drive from the entrance of Plitvice. It was great. It was nice accommodations, like along this like dirt road, kind of not in the mountains, but kind of up a little bit.
And did you go to the national park 2 days?
Yes, we did. But by the time we took the ferry to Split, got our rental car, got out of the city and got there, we went there like late afternoon just to kind of see them, just so we wanted to be able to see them. So we explored a very little bit that first day and then, went back and knew we wanted to get up and go early the second day.
Now you see these waterfalls and you see the walkways and all that. Like, how big of an area are we talking?
Yeah, it's very big. We definitely could have spent 2 full days. But yeah, so there's 2 entrances. There's 2 separate entrances. The one we went to the first day went to like the main waterfall. So we wanted to kind of be able to see that. And we went late afternoon thinking it might be a little less crowded. That was the one thing, is they were, just madly crowded. And again, we were expecting this, so it wasn't like any big surprise, so it didn't take away from the experience at all. The second day we went to the opposite entrance, and that was like kind of hit or miss. There were some areas where like you're walking along these walkways and it's just like, herding cattle, right? Just tons of people. But then we, got away from some of the main falls, and like we'd go 15 minutes without seeing a single person. So it really kind of, that does kind of show you how big the park was.
So, but you would say that was obviously, again, this was somewhere that came with a lot of hype. You've seen this when you see the pictures, it was it up to it? I mean, you think
it was? Oh, it totally was. Yeah, it was beautiful. And the kids really loved it. That's the first time they had ever seen anything like that. I mean, there is really nothing like that. We've been to other waterfalls like Iguazu in Argentina and Brazil. And I mean, that's a totally different scale, but I mean, I put them kind of up there with those. I mean, it was crazy. It's a massive, massive park. You know, the color of the water, like the lakes that they go into was really cool, and just the different sizes of the waterfalls, and, you know, just all the pathways were really cool. You know, it's these little wooden winding pathways with no railing. So it was a little terrifying with our kids at points, but it was really cool. They really enjoyed that part of it as well. The kind of, you know, danger.
And then it was closing ceremonies, going out on top, Šolta.
Yes. We drove back to Split, and then I think we did just take a ferry over to Šolta. And Šolta was, when we first decided to go to Šolta, we found this place that we like thought it was like the coolest place, and we drug our feet on booking, and it got snatched up before we were able to book it. So we debated like kind of changing course because we couldn't book this one place that we wanted. We ended up finding, and the place we were originally looking at was like kind of in the middle of nowhere. Like we probably would have had to rent a car to do it, which we were a little unsure of. So we kind of pivoted a little bit, and we stayed in a town called Stamorska on Šolta. And I mean, it is a tiny, tiny little town. I wish it was pedestrian, because that was the only kind of downfall of it. I mean, there was one street that kind of went around the bay basically, and we stayed right on that little street, and we were like the balcony of the place we stayed in was overlooking the beach. I mean, it was literally across the street from us. So we had a beach outside our front door essentially, and it was great. You know, our little balcony, it wasn't even a balcony, it was like an outdoor kitchen. You know, there was a stove, there was a fridge, there was really comfortable seating, big old table. So we spent most of our time hanging out there or hanging out at the beach.
So how did you come across this Šolta?
Gosh, that's a good question, Scott. We knew we didn't want to go too much farther north, and I think we were just maybe we knew that both Korčula and Hvar were going to be crowded and heavily touristed because they're the more popular ones. So I think we were just kind of looking for one that was a little less renowned. And frankly, we were just doing like the Airbnb search, like kind of jumping from island to island, and we found that place on Šolta, and that's what first kind of turned us onto it. It was just this one particular place that we found, but then when we looked into the island a little more, we're like, you know what, this would probably be cool. This would be a cool place to end. It seems like it might be a little more chill and relaxing. So that's really how we ended up there.
Obviously, it's quieter than the other places.
Yes. Yeah, it was definitely quieter just based on the sheer size of it. You know, it was just a tiny, tiny little place. You know, having the accommodation we had right on the beach was remarkable. There was one bakery in town that I went to every single morning. Like I would go line up before it opened to get pastries every single morning because it was right down the road. It was really cool. We really enjoyed it.
Did you have any of those bureks?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah, for sure.
Thank you. Right.
Yeah, that was one of the first things we ate actually in Dubrovnik, because we did the same thing. We kind of went to a little grocery store that was right near our apartment and just, you know, grabbed some stuff there to just eat at the apartment.
Oh, I just love those little bakeries there.
Oh yeah. Yes. Yeah. The one in Stamorska was incredible. I mean, I went every single morning. You know, I would wake up and I would walk down there by myself. And so that was nice. I kind of got a little quiet time, and I'd stand in line and wait, and then go back, and we'd sit on that balcony in our outdoor kitchen and drink coffee and eat pastries, and then head down to the beach.
Do you get upset at the end of a trip and try to like cram a bunch of things on the last day? And
no, well, because we had to make our way from there to Split, and we ended up staying one night in Split, which wasn't initially on our agenda. So we cut our Stamorska by one night and spent a night in Split just because of the ferry situation, because we wanted to get an early enough ferry. And then we went all the way down to Dubrovnik. We actually stayed south of Dubrovnik in a little city called Kavtat. So yeah, by the time we got off the ferry and then had to, catch a Uber that was 45 minutes. And by the time we got to Kavtat, we really they had a big inflatable there. So we let our kids jump on that and we had a nice dinner. So yeah, we didn't do much the last day. It was really spent like on a ferry essentially. And then, a nice meal. Kids had one more thing. And then we flew to Paris from there.
There was that buzzkill was in the air.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and then I got to
Yeah.
ask you, I've asked you about the burek, but I got to ask you about the rattlers.
Oh yeah, we had lots of those. Yeah, they were great because you can buy single beers pretty much anywhere, and that's what we were drinking. And they're great because they're low ABV. It's like they're like 2.5, 3%, and they taste delicious on a super hot day. Yeah, we have these dry bags that we were using as coolers, basically. We'd buy a few. We'd go, every morning before our heading out to the beach, and we'd buy some rattlers and buy some stuff to make some sandwiches and head on out.
It sounds like you did it right.
We did.
So would you, in general, would you say it's a good family destination?
Oh, 1,000%. Yeah, especially if your kids are into the water. If they like beaches and swimming, and no, I am glad that our kids were old enough that they could all swim. By and large, there are these tiny little beaches, and you just walk right in, and there's not big waves or anything like that. So I mean, it was great for kids, and I mean, like I said, the people were very kid friendly everywhere.
Take me back to one of those lunches where you were overlooking the water, the kids were out swimming, you were sipping wine, and if someone walked up to you right then and was like, Croatia, sum it up, what would you say?
If you're a fan of like crystal clear, clean, beautiful water, I've been to a lot of places in the world. I've not been to a place as beautiful as that as far as the water goes. It is friendly. The people are super friendly. It's the perfect destination if you are a big fan of being on and around the water. And if you're looking for something, especially if you're an American, if you're looking for something different than what you consider a beach vacation, this hits it. It's totally different, but in like all the best ways.
All right. I think we'll leave it at that.
Perfect.
Thanks for coming back. I think maybe I'll release you, two's enough. Two's enough of you doing a tour of duty.
Well, I'm happy to come back anytime, Scott. I don't know when we're going to be coming back to Europe, so I might not have much relevant information for a little while, but you never know.